get an answer.
Thank you. Wish to sum up, Councillor Dick?
Yes, well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I concur with Councillor Barker's views totally, and Councillor Bevan. I do believe, though, that in fact, if logs will be the focus, logs will make it operate profitably and justify investment. But in the longer run, there is a vast amount of product that can and should be shipped out of Gisborne, which will be ongoing, annual, and increase in volume, and that is what will make this this venture fully sustainable and profitable in the long term, and also adjust for some downturn in the log harvest as they pass their peak, and then move back up to the next harvest cycle. So I still believe and would advocate that NGR and Mr. Cornwall work on all options and present that to us in several weeks' time. It's a big, tall ask because of the time frame, and I would reiterate that if there are any impediments in the information flow, then both NGR and Mr. Cornwall should be in touch with the chairman, and for the chairman to use his facilitative and advocacy abilities to deal with it. In terms of Councillor Hewitt's position, I'd just like to say, with respect, it's not an about. This resolution is not an about face. And if she can let me know, privately or otherwise, what other way in which we can deal with the issues of State Highway 2, its ability to manage vastly increased traffic, and the ways in which we can foster economic development in the north of the region, then I'd appreciate that advice from her. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dick. Well, I'll put that motion, and all those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, no. Carried. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Nick. Right. Item 9, Hawke's Bay Regional Investment Company Board. Oh, for a division. Okay. All those in favour, please. In favour and against.
Mr. Chairman, just an issue with this matter going to a corporate services meeting chaired by Councillor Hewitt. It appears to me that Councillor Hewitt has a predetermined position on this, and I'm wondering whether that's the appropriate place for this matter to be taken.
I don't agree that she's predetermined on this. She's just has some challenges in the journey, and I'll consider your view. Maybe I will chair it on the day. We'll see how we go. But
Mr. Chairman, I think
I take your concern on board, Councillor Dick.
I don't mind where it is, because I didn't know anything about that meeting until this morning.
I'm not going to debate it here.
I need to be assured of the independence of the process, and I'm not assured of that at the moment.
Okay, and I'm not going to debate it here, but I take your concern on board, Councillor Dick. Okay, item 9, Hawke's Bay Regional Investment Company Board.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's not a very long paper, so I'm not going to spend a particularly long time going over it, but essentially I think it's in terms of council's good management of its investment company, I think it really is appropriate for you to consider a definite start date for a permanent board, as opposed to the current transition board arrangements that we have at the moment. So what I'm proposing is the 1st of July of this year, so the beginning of the new financial year, and I've outlined some scenarios two of which one of which would be if financial close is reached in this current financial year. Secondly, if it's not reached in this financial year, and thirdly, if it's not reached at all. But basically, there are ways around particularly in the case of the latter two, of managing those particular situations so that a permanent board could be in place. Council and directors would not face potential conflict issues. If financial close is not reached, those council and directors could, or the RWSS work of the board could be ring-fenced to apply to, or be dealt with only by the independent directors. So really what I'm seeking from you is an opportunity now to implement the decision that you made in July last year, and wanting to get some guidance from you before we go to a consultant who would then be looking for expressions of interest from both councillors and from independent directors as to their interest in being part of the HBRC board. So this really is around the date of starting that. So I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. I'll start with Councillor Belford, actually. Sorry.
Just, if you just remind me of the process that flows through here, looking at, for example, 8.11, if there is a water company set up, who appoints what?
A Ruataniwha Water Partnership, or whatever it ended up being called, is appointed by HBRC and not by the council. There would be, but the HBRC would be a minority partnership or have obviously be represented, but not be the sole representatives. They would appoint one of their directors to that.
Just to follow up, as far as HBRC itself, do we, as a council, appoint the chairman, or is the chairman selected by the members of the committee?
No, the chairman of HBRC is appointed by council.
Councillor Barker.
Following up on the theme raised by Councillor Dick about conflicts of interest previously, given that this is going to have council directors on it, those councillors who are interested in being on the board of HBRC, what should they participate in this debate or not?
Who are they?
Yeah.
Well, I just want to
Might
say
be nine of us.
Yeah.
Well, there has been indication, yes.
Yeah. But I think
I'm just asking the question.
fair enough. I think two points, Councillor. First of all, I think the whole of the council participated in the discussions on the 30th of July about the makeup of a permanent board. And secondly, I think that all I'm asking you to consider is an effective from date today.
I understand that, but I Councillor Dick, people have expressed an interest and asking you from a pure position where I have expressed previously that I have no interest in being on it.
Of course, we won't write you off, Councillor Barker. You may change. You may change your view. Questions.
Be written up before.
Any other questions? I think it's a fairly straightforward request here, and it does give the Chief Executive opportunity then to get the cogs moving and the wheels in motion, and it will take a month or two to sort this out. So, any other questions? Councillor Barker.
I'm just questioning the wisdom of this, and I just want it to be put to me again, that if we have not, the original date was set on the basis that we were going to have reached financial close surely by this point. That was the best known science at the time, but the best known science has been proven to be wrong. So I would say a reasonable speculative guess would be that financial close has not been reached at this particular point of time. So is it better for us to wait for this decision until financial close has been passed? Because that was our original thinking, that we should wait and keep that team in place until financial close. If it is now not appropriate to do that, why was it appropriate before, and why should we change our mind?
I don't think we're asking you to change your mind. I think that the reality is that the transition board has been in place for longer than it was ever anticipated, because working on specifically on the RWSS. And I think, if because we are still in a judicial process with the now referral back to the Board of Inquiry, really the council has no, and HBRC have no control over timelines in a sense, because we're still dependent upon this whole judicial process. And if, for example, the Board of Inquiry findings get referred to the appealed to the High Court, and then, whatever happens from then, we could still, have not reached financial close realistically by the 30th of June. What we're looking to do here is to actually give some certainty, as much as anything, to the Board of HBRC, but I think just in terms of good governance, to actually recognise that, yes, the RWSS is still going through the motions over here, but that's not the only reason that we have an investment company. We have a much larger investment just up the road, and there are other matters that are potentially going to come before the board of HBRC, so that it's preferable to have a permanent board in place and to give the current directors some certainty around, some of them may not want to, be on it for much longer, for example.
That's opened up some questions, Councillor Barker. There's no hands up before. I'll start with Councillor Bevan.
Thank you, Chair. I've got some concerns about the time frame for this as well, because there's so much uncertainty about the Board of Inquiry process and whether that might get appealed or not, and I'm really concerned that we're jumping the gun here. But let's assume that the dam does not go ahead for the purposes of this discussion, and HBRC is left with only one investment, which is the port. And I would at that time then question whether there is a justification for having an HBRC at all, just to look after one asset. And I think that this paper is presupposing that we would continue to have HBRC, and I really think that that's the first question that we would need to have a discussion about. Is it appropriate that we continue with that structure or not if the dam does not proceed? So I'm struggling to support this.
I think, the purpose of establishing an investment company, there's a number of advantages to doing that, some financial advantages for council, but also advantages in terms of obtaining expertise from outside, expertise in governance and other areas. While the port is the primary asset presently for the investment company, it's a vehicle for moving forward in a number of different directions. So if, for example, the rail was to go ahead, council's investment in the rail, we would hand that over, I'm almost certain, to HBRC to manage that. There may well be other investments that council wishes to look at in the short, medium, long term, and the investment company, the holding company, provides a really good vehicle to be able to do that. So I wouldn't, I don't see it living or dying by whether or not the dam proceeds. That's my view, and I think that was always the intent of the council when it was set up.
Moving down the line, I'll get to you, Councillor Graham. Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My queries arise around the cost of setting up subsidiaries or something to hold the assets to keep councillors at length from that. Would a separate company not have to be established as a subsidiary of HBRC to keep a distance from? Have you checked out the legalities around this and to keep that clear separation of council, because there was the indication for council that a mixed model was to be retained for HBRC?
Yes.
So can you clarify whether that has been investigated as to what would need to be done and what the costs of setting up a structure that would properly keep those councillors sufficiently at arm's length, not to have them conflicted in any future decisions?
I'm not sure that I can specifically answer your question about costs. I'm sorry, I don't know if the works or what the answer is to that just off the top of my head. I mean, the council's obviously debated the potential conflict situation before. We've had legal advice around that. We went over that again in the paper on the 30th of July, which looked at councils acting as directors versus councillors acting as elected representatives around the council table, and for the purposes of, for example, discussion, to make absolutely clear if there was to be a mixed director model and the RWSS was still live in terms of not having reached financial close, that there would be a ring fencing suggested in here so that only the independent directors continue to look at that, so that the councillors, without any question of doubt, could then vote on it at the council meetings.
That's quite where we're at. But anyway, Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Chair. Just along that theme of having an investment company that gathers expertise in governance and investment, so why didn't we hand the rail straight over to HBRC in the very beginning, so that we're not even talking about it here, so that they have the expertise, they have the commercial nous, and they come back to us and say this is what we should do. If we've got a company, how come we didn't use them for the rail?
Yeah, good question. We did ask ourselves, should that go straight to HBRC? A couple of reasons really, Councillor. It was quite a, as you'll recall, it was only a decision made in late November to get that up and running. At the end of the day, the lease offer has been made to the regional council, so we have considered that it's initially anyway a regional council matter to determine whether or not a lease is potentially viable. If you do decide that at the end of next month, I would also see that the actual management of it would be something that would be handed over to HBRC for ongoing discussions with KiwiRail on the details, etc., 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 working with NGR, on the operating side and so forth. But I think it was, KiwiRail had made it quite clear that the offer had come straight through to us. So that was probably the principal reason for doing that. Also, NGR had already previously had a reasonable level of engagement with the council, and it was probably sat more comfortably with them to continue to deal with council.
I don't really accept that answer too well, Liz, to be honest. So you're saying it's to say that it's commercial. It's a commercial decision. It should have been with them, but you're saying it really is a political decision. So it's a political decision rather than a commercial decision, because we handle the politics, and if it's a commercial decision, they should be handling it.
When it becomes commercial, so we're not quite there yet. We're still in a push and shove phase, really, aren't we? As we heard before, with
we're deciding whether we're going to. We've already said 250,000, but we are deciding on whether we're going to action that 5 million that we've in the long-term plan.
Ultimately, yeah.
So we're about to make a major commercial decision.
We will seek advice from HBRC on that. Thank you, Councillor.
Let's not complicate the rail thing in the meantime.
Let's get back
please.
to the 1st of July discussion. It's early 15. Councillor Scott.
I really apologise. I should have thought of these problems before now. But if the subsidiary is merely a committee of HBRC, then all the directors actually ultimately have to make the decisions and are responsible. I don't think it is possible legally to ring fence certain directors within it. I think you would actually need a legal entity which then reported. So I feel, I really apologise, I hadn't seen these difficulties before now, but I've reached this point now of thinking that we could be committing to something that we don't quite understand the full legal ramifications of. Because ultimately, with something that's holding it, all decisions of that group actually would have to be made by the directors, and they'd have to be jointly responsible for those. decisions.
I-
So I think there are ways around it, but perhaps it needs a little bit more investigation before we can actually reach that point.
I'm agreed. I think Councillor Scott's correct. I think in terms of company law, I think she's correct.
The directors would be liable, yeah. But the heavy lifting could be done by the smaller group. No, I can't either.
Can I put it simply to you? That when you're in charge of something like this, you cannot make a construct that contracts out your liability. That's what that's attempting to do in a way. It's put a construct around and say, well, we're not responsible, we're reliable. You can't do that. Directors are reliable.
Just
I just wonder, as a solution to this, that we endorse the principle of it, but request clarification around the legal entity that would be established.
accepted, because it does, we are putting the cart before the horse here a bit.
I think there's another step to be gone through before we are comfortable to be in a position
But
to
once
make that
we,
decision.
once we have something to aim at, as in a date and a target, then all these other machinations can begin, surely. So
Commitment, not a target.
so can someone help me with the recommendation here then?
Could I suggest that we agree in principle that we aim to replace the permanent board by the 1st of July, once an adequate legal entity is established that would ensure any council directors' independence from the decision-making around the RWSs.
Get on that?
Most of it. Well, that may be setting up a
Why don't we
separate
just,
company.
why don't we just put an agree in principle and leave it as it is?
I think we need.
You need more than that.
I'd second councillor Scott's.
I think we need, and I'm quite happy to work on wordsmithing the thing, but the thing is that we agree in principle to reach that 1st of July deadline, but we still need a mechanism for ensuring that a subsidiary of independent directors is fully responsible for making those decisions, and how you word that. We need,
Let's just take a break for a couple of minutes here and see if we can get something together. You've been on holiday too long, Councillor Barker. You've got 15 minutes to wait.
Well, I just think it's just an ideal time to have a smoker break where people can do two things at once, have a cup of tea, and people can think and sort this out.
Over a seconder, but let's just see how this looks.
Have that done beforehand, before we move to the next step.
Well, it could be provided a legal entity is established.
Provided, that's the word.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm just saying,
Yeah.
Just order here, please. Let's see. I think we can get through this. Mover, is that what you said? Mover?
well, we're doing it Mickey Mouse. They're going to get a Mickey Mouse solution.
Decisions and recommendations by RWSs.
I'd agree. Can we take a break on this while we play with the words a bit? Because quite frankly, I would suggest that ensuring that a legal entity is established as forming a new company. And I think we don't actually know yet what we need to know that we can legally.
Okay, let's
separate
adjourn.
them.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. Very wise, sage comments of yours. For 10 or 15 minutes, and when we come back, we'll deal with this this motion, which is.
And you say to the chair that you come to my decision, my recommendation now, because I'll prove the old saying, it's wrong to be right too soon.